Good evening. Please do stand for a moment at the beginning of our service as we light the Yorkshire candle and then say Baruch. Please be seated. I'm Rabbi Benji Stanley, the rabbi of this community that Bernard and Batya were such beloved members of for so many years. Batya was intelligent, direct, cultured, warm. She was loved and she loved many others. Rabbi Sheila Schulman said, "We recognize that each of us is not so much a person as a world, or rather the bearer in his or herself of a world, a unique, irreplaceable, populated world, linked by a myriad threads to other such worlds. And when someone dies who has been part of our life, there is a rent in the universe, like a star vanishing. But like a star vanishing, that world leaves traces in us, as a star does in space. So we mourn, but we remember, and we know there will always be a living trace of that person in our consciousness always. We're here to remember and to celebrate Batya's life, to reflect on her and the light that she brought to us. In our service, there will be some English liturgical reading, there will be some cantoral moments, and Batya so loved cantoral music. There will be tributes and reflections, and there'll be a few moments of quiet. And all of this is to give us the chance to reflect on Batya and what she's brought to us. We will begin on page 2, reading together that first full paragraph in English, a blessing that celebrates light, as we reflect on the light that Batya brought to us. Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who at thy word bringest on the evening twilight, with wisdom openest the gates of heaven, and with understanding changes times and various seasons, and settest the stars in their watches in the sky, according to thy will. Thou createst day and night, rolling away the light before the darkness, and the darkness before the light. Thou makest the day to pass, and the night to come, dividing day from night. And the Lord of hosts is thy name. Blessed art thou, O Lord, who bringest on the evening twilight. And halfway down the page, we move to reflecting on love, as Yoav will sing this second blessing.
אהבת עולם בית ישראל, עמך אהבת, תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת. על כן אדוני אלוהינו, בשוכבנו ובקומנו, נשיח בחוקיך, ונשמח ונעלוז בדברי תורה
like to invite Gideon to give the first tribute.
Thank you, Rabbi. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Here we are again, this time to remember and celebrate my mother. I won't use the word sadly, because Mummy was very clear over the past 8 months since Daddy died that she looked forward to joining him, and we should therefore be happy when she passed. I also didn't say sadly, because Mummy lived an unbelievably rich and fascinating life. Not many people have stories that take them from the siege of Leningrad to the peak in Hong Kong, with stops in Tashkent, Jerusalem, London and Brussels along the way. While these experiences range from joyous to truly horrific, Mummy's incredible story gave her both wisdom and a zest for life that she was always willing to share with others. She was really proud of and protective about everything her children did, and shared those feelings with pretty much anyone at every available opportunity. If half of what you all have heard about the three of us is true, then I would be able to walk home over water tomorrow. However, and especially because I've lived half the world away from Mum and Dad since the age of 15, I didn't experience her flair and infectious enthusiasm as often as I would have liked. During my last year at Winchester, my relations with the administration were often, as they say, fraught. A wonderfully descriptive word that just about covers it. On a visit to London, Mummy shared some wisdom that I've tried to pass on to my own children. Do whatever you want, just don't get caught. Life would be much simpler and no doubt less interesting if I'd listened more carefully to the caveat, and I've also tried to pass that important insight along to my children. On that same trip to London, Mummy served me a breakfast of caviar on toast, accompanied by shots of chilled vodka. I've never felt so Russian. Many of you sent us condolence notes that describe Mummy. Thank you for those. They were all incredibly beautiful and touching. She was lucky to have such loving friends. Among other things, you described her as proud, resilient, artistic, vivacious, intelligent, brave, caring and charismatic. Mummy was all of those things, but after some discussion, the word that the three of us believe describes her best is warm. Warm as in friendly and gregarious, warm as in emotional and intense, warm as in funny and playful. Mummy was all of those things too. There are also a few things that she most definitely was not. First of all, and this will come as no surprise to people who've known her since we lived in Hampstead, Mum failed spectacularly at driving. England, perhaps the entire world, became a safer place when Mum and Dad moved to Brussels and she gave up her licence. I remember a time when the family Volvo was seen driving down Finchley Road with no one behind the wheel. It turned out that Mummy had been stroking our sick cat in the passenger side footwell as she drove to the vet. Vision of the road while driving is so overrated. And it didn't matter where any particular trip started or ended, it seemed that the only route that Mummy knew required a trip over the Hammersmith flyover. Moving on, Mum was rarely punctual. As many of you know, she was 2 hours late to her first date with Daddy, though luckily he had brought along a good read. Dad used to like to tell friends that she was usually even later. Mummy's clock was just set to a different time zone, one that only she seemed to understand. For a brief period, Daddy tried moving forward the scheduled time of appointment, so a 7 o'clock dinner went in the diary at 6 o'clock. Chaos resulted, and with no improvement in timeliness, the diary experiment ended quietly. Most recently, Mummy's track record of tardiness came up when one of her grandsons learned that she had died. He noted with remarkable insight that she was late again, this time to meet up with Daddy. And so to the last thing, Mummy was most definitely not good at, being alone. With all of you, family and friends sitting here, it can be difficult to imagine that she felt lonely, but hers was a great love story. She and Daddy had been completely devoted to each other from the moment they met. Daddy, truly her partner in everything, and life just didn't make sense to Mummy if the two of them couldn't face it together. And so, as much as we all miss her, and we do terribly, we should be happy that Mummy is where she wanted to be with Daddy. We love them both. Thank you.
Thank you, Gideon. Please stand on page 3 for the Shema, which will say in Hebrew and at Batya's preference in English afterwards. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed.
V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, b'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha. V'hayu ha'devarim ha'ele, asher anochi netzavecha elyon al levavecha. V'shinamtam levanecha, v'dibarta bam. V'shivtecha b'veitecha, u'v'lechtecha v'derech, u'v'shokbecha u'v'kumecha, u'kshatam la'ot al yedecha, v'hayu letotofot bein enecha, u'ktavtam al mezuzot beitecha, u'visharecha. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Blessed be his name, his glorious kingdom is forever and ever. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thy heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt speak of them when thou sittest in thy house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thy hand, and thou shalt be for frontlets between thy eyes, and thou shalt write them upon the doorposts of thy house and upon thy gates. Please be seated. Then I now invite Adrian to give the second reading.
This is a particularly poignant time for myself and my wife. In our diaries, we were having lunch, actually yesterday. I'd suggested lunch, and it came back that we were having dinner. I suggested that I pick her up at her flat. It came back that she would be deposited at the restaurant, meet us there. And I sort of envisaged, and I didn't quite know why, except it was Barcher, of her arriving in a palanquin, roaring with laughter and telling 4 strong men where to put her down. It was fanciful, but then, as a journalist, I'm rather used to people thinking that is the nature of my profession. But it was appropriate, because she loved life, and the remarkable thing about it was the way she included anyone she came across in that love of life. Barcher and Bernard, Bernard and Barcher. If they sound like one word, it was because they were one people. Anyone who knew them, and particularly if you knew them as an outsider, knew almost from the start how very close they were, and how much they were a unit. You could speak about Barcher, but you couldn't think of her without thinking of Bernard, and the other way round. And so I make no excuses for saying I would like to talk about them as a couple, not just Barcher. And Barcher would have wanted that, and so would Bernard. The funny thing was that they weren't at all alike. Bernard was in some ways very English. He had a passion for the English language, and he was really Dickensian in his love of people and their foibles and their peculiarities and the situations they got themselves in. Barcher was not English, not at all. Russian by birth, a migrant. She had that wonderful accent to the very end that Russians have, and sort of musical accent. And she had that passion, my God, she did, about clothes, about textiles, about anything she was interested in, design, but above all, about people. She was extraordinary, always, in the way that she really loved people. Anyone she spoke to, anyone she came across, she wanted to embrace into her and find out about them and talk about them. And she was, I think in that word, a life enhancer. But even more, the two of them together were life enhancers, bringing great pleasure. One of the great moments of one's life was always dinner with the Ashers. Barcher would express herself in sometimes the most baroque forms of design, flowers and other things. And Bernard would roll his eyes in mock humour at what the dickens was she up to. And for a three-course meal was 3 courses of pure performance. My wife and I knew them from when they were in London, and Barcher loved London and liked particularly museums and other things. But the two of them were very much loved entertaining. Bernard was quite extraordinary. He was working on what was called the Little Neddies, which were, he was seconded to the government to bring together various British businesses to plan their future in cooperation with the government, and never the twain shall meet. But he managed to make it really funny, and colourful even. How can you make Little Neddies colourful, I used to think. But he always found some story about it. And equally well, Barcher always set out to prove that the role of an executive wife was not to be in a smart suit and behave with great decorum. Decorum was never a word I heard her say, nor indeed practiced. They then moved to Brussels in a rather difficult time. Bernard had a long and troubled divorce, really, from ITT. And I thought at the time that he would not have been able to take it as well as he did, or indeed as humorously as he was terribly funny about it, if it had not been for Barcher, because Barcher didn't do feeling sorry for yourself, and she didn't do that sort of kindness. They then went to, as many of you will know, to Hong Kong, where we visited them, and that was something of a surprise. They suddenly took up into what was little less than a palace near the top of the hill, and the bank he was working for was extremely hierarchical, and the higher up the hill you were, the more important you were, and the lower down the hill you were, the less important. I know, because my brother was well down the hill. I used to gaze upwards. Bernard, I have to say, never really took to it. He kept complaining that he couldn't get used to silent Chinese servants picking up anything he dropped and saying nothing. Barcher took it much better and joined in the expat life with great enthusiasm. Abigail said to me just this morning. She thought it was partly because she'd always been a migrant and an outsider, so the idea of moving in a circle in which everyone was outsiders and everyone was migrants in a sense was much more accommodating. They came back to London, where they went to Montpellier Street. They both loved London, and Bernard would give me a regular update on how deep his neighbours, who were Saudis, were going in their efforts to add a gymnasium and then a cinema to their accommodation. But the thing I actually remember most from that time was a conversation I had with him after they had both been to Israel. And he said with a fervour that I was not used to from him. And in his way, although he was wonderfully outgoing, he didn't give that much of the very private out, but he said it had moved him greatly, that he had felt at peace and well. And in a way, that is how I like to remember them. I think of them strolling hand in hand in a valley in Judea, with Bernard saying, "Look, you've brought the wrong shoes," and Archie saying, "The trouble with you, Bernard, is you've never understood women's power." And then them just laughing as they walked up to see the view from the top. It was a terrible blow, I think, to all of us when Bernard died, and then when Barcia, there was not as much of a surprise. The thing was, speaking to Barcia then, I felt that it wasn't just grief she felt, and it certainly wasn't relief, despite the years she spent looking after him. It was that she read somehow something had been taken from her, and she was no longer complete. And now that both have died, that is what we feel. We're outsiders. That our life isn't complete without them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adrian. Please do stand on page 4 for the Amidah. Please do stand. Joanne will lead us in singing the first page, and then we'll leave a couple minutes of quiet for quiet reflection on Batya.
Adonai sefatai tiftachu fi tehilatecha. Adonai sefatai tiftachu fi tehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avoteinu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor ve'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Kone Hakol, Zocher Chastei Avot, ומביא גואל לפני בניהם למען שמו באהבה, מלך חוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה בתימתה רב להושיע, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיה מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומידו מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיה המתים.
ואתה קדוש יושב תהילות ישראל.
קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך כל הארץ כבודו.
ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו.
ימלוך אדוני לעולם, מלאכה
אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש.
Amen.
We now take some moments for quiet reflection. Do feel free to carry on standing or to sit. Bring us together singing on the bottom of page 8. I'd like to invite Abigail to come and give us a report.
My mother was truly a life force. So much so that I find it hard to imagine that she's not going to walk into this room. Our entire lives, wherever she was, even if it was thousands of miles away, we felt an extraordinary connection to her. Despite her diminutive height, she was a powerful presence. She loved all three of her children like a lioness, fighting for each with remarkable strength. Whatever we did wrong, we knew loud and clear that she would be there to protect us and fight for us. When Gideon and I and a bunch of other young neighborhood pirates decided to rob what we thought was an abandoned haunted house, it was so Mum to berate the poor police officer who'd caught us and brought us home. I'll never forget the look on her face when she told him in no uncertain terms, "Take your hands off my children." Perhaps, having lost her parents at such a young age, she was determined to do everything in her power to ensure that her children always felt protected. Mummy overcame such appalling loss in her childhood, and whilst she carried that pain with her always, she did everything she could to shield us from it. Her escape from Russia was the stuff of movies. Fleeing St. Petersburg, hiding in Tashkent, leaving suddenly with her young brother on false papers, a train journey into the unknown, sleeping in the luggage rack head to toe with other children, jumping out at the Polish border when the guards boarded the train, disappearing into the darkness of night in the snow-covered forest. I simply can't imagine how unbelievably frightening that must have been for a little girl to experience, and all having just lost her parents. There were recollections that would make us smile. Trying chocolate for the first time at an Austrian internment camp, bars given to her by the American GIs, and past the endless time at a refugee camp in Genoa, cutting paper into doilies, a sure sign of her creative future. Creativity was in her DNA, and it ran through her veins. Mummy had a way of making everything around her look stylish effortlessly. She spent a lifetime making beautiful things. We all recall as children watching her at her huge loom, punting the bobbin and pushing the pedals. She taught me how to look at the world in a completely visual way and how to understand pattern, colour, texture and form. I owe all of that to her. As you all know, as Adrian mentioned, Mummy had a very strong accent which she never lost. There was no mistaking that unique voice, a blend of Russian, Yiddish and Hebrew. London wasn't always the cosmopolitan city it is today, and Mum's accent really stood out. She seemed so exotic compared to the other mums. As my brother mentioned, she would drive us in that big beaten-up Volvo estate in which she could barely see above the dashboard. And she would literally stop it in the middle of the road to take one of us out, dressed in her flowing kaftan with her multitude of clanging Afghani coin necklaces. Often there wasn't a rhyme or reason as to why or where she'd stop, but going down a one-way street to buy a sword for Gideon to match his fancy dress costume, or jumping out of the car without putting on the handbrake to drop Jessica off at school whilst both of them watched the car literally roll down the hill, were very commonplace. But however eccentric she seemed, friends still wanted to come to our house to play. It was so Mummy to have drawn a huge, colourful mural on an upstairs wall in the spirit of Rousseau, which she encouraged us and all our friends to crayon on as well. The kids thought she was amazing. They were all being told off for marking up their walls at home. We were being encouraged to do it more. There were times when I wished she was more conventional, but we laughed about it years later. She would throw us birthday parties. We wanted the same food as everyone else. We wanted frosted mini cakes and Victoria sponge, but Mummy would make desserts made of lady fingers drenched with alcohol-infused Zabbioni or oranges soaked in brandy. There weren't many desserts eaten at our parties.
That's what I want.
That wasn't Mummy's only foray into culinary experiences. Some of you here may remember that in the 1970s, she and a friend wrote a cookbook called Canny Cooking. It was fast food from a can prepared at home, and it was tested on Daddy, her 3 children, as well as all of our lodgers. Afterwards, wherever we were in the UK, Daddy would send us into the bookshops to make sure that Mummy's cookbook was front, centre, and on top of any other cookbooks on display. But Canny Cooking was just one of her many achievements. It still amazes me how much she did in her life. Art teacher, jewellery designer, crisis counsellor, painter, textile designer, cookbook author, interior designer, and plumbing expert. Who here knew that she took a plumbing course and she spent her life challenging any plumber's diagnoses when they came to our house? That was so her. But perhaps Mummy's greatest talent was her emotional intuitiveness. So many friends have said how incredibly perceptive and emotionally giving she was, and how genuinely interested in other people. She always managed to get the essence of who people were. When Daddy got sick, the light simply went out. My sister Jessica came almost every day during the 8 grim years of his illness, and during all of that time, Mummy just refused to believe that Daddy wasn't able to still understand her, just as he always had. She continued her loving conversations with him during this entire time and never left his side. Clearly, her desire to be back again with Daddy was a powerful force. As someone said recently, they were truly inseparable. One without the other just faded away. As a friend of hers recently wrote to us, Barcia had infectious enthusiasm and lit up a room with her warmth. You truly felt happier after spending time with her. I love you, Mummy.
And now I invite Ruth to give a reading.
She is gone. You can shed tears that she is gone. Or you can smile because she has lived. You can close your eyes and pray that she will come back. Or you can open your eyes and see all that she has left. Your heart can be empty because you can't see her. Or you can be full of the love that she shared. You can turn your back on tomorrow and live yesterday, or you can be happy for tomorrow because of yesterday. You can remember her and only that she is gone, or you can cherish her memory and let it live on. You can cry and close your mind, be empty and turn your back. Or you can do what she would want. Smile, open your eyes, love, and go on.
On the top of page 10, we say in English together, Psalm 23. The Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely your goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. It was just over a year ago, on the evening of the 24th of December, that Batya and I first really talked. I had been visiting members, and I, a good rabbi on Christmas Eve, had no plans for the evening. I knew I was near where Batya lived, and I had been meaning to be in touch, having not yet spent time together in person. I called, knowing it was very last minute, to ask if I might pop around straight away on the 24th of December at about 6 p.m. And the truth is that when I called and spoke to Batya, I couldn't understand exactly what Batya was saying on the phone, as she was also very hoarse at that point as well. I thought I heard enough to know, yes, I could pop round. So I turned up, not 100% sure how welcome I was, or how much I would understand when we did talk. An hour and a half later, I left so happy. Everyone left Batya happier. She was so warm, so genuinely interested in others, and so interesting. It was the best Christmas Eve that this rabbi has ever had. She gave me wine and treats. Within minutes, I could hear everything she said. More than that, we shared feelings, strong impressions, great warmth and openness, as we talked about how she lost her mother at age 1 and her father at 4, and was brought up by her grandfather, a rabbi in Tel Aviv, about how she went to Orthodox religious schools between ages 11 and 21, but in those settings, she told me, she felt all the restriction of religion, while being told that the good stuff, intellectual and spiritual as she was, wasn't for her as a woman. She was informed and learned and passionate about her Judaism, she was deeply proud and grateful towards her grandfather, Rabbi Shaul Dov Zislin, who was an enormous influence on her life in giving her both a thick understanding of Judaism and freedom of choice. We talked that evening about how she came over here adventurously as a young woman, studying at St. Martin's, how she met Bernard at a party through a series of fortuitous accidents. She told me about the two of them living in Hong Kong for a decade, and she proudly told me about her teaching in Hammersmith. She talked so proudly about each of her children and grandchildren. And then when she took me around that beautiful, colourful house, full of glorious art and design, there was no doubt of what was most important there. As we said hello to Bernard, and she showed me photos of all the family. We have just, in our annual Torah reading, begun the book of Exodus. The story of the Exodus, our liturgy tells us, is one of slavery to freedom, from sorrow to joy, from mourning to festivity, from darkness to great light, and from servitude to redemption. The way the story is told in our Torah, in which Moses needs to find the courage himself to then give the people courage, and the way we recall the story on Passover evening as if we personally experienced it, teaches us that we need to live this story of darkness to light in our own lives. It's not an abstract story confined to the past. It's a story for now, for each of us. We learn that we have to make this journey from darkness to light. It doesn't just happen. Batya lived this story, finding and bringing so much light. And may we take inspiration from our memories of her, so that we live this story of great light too. She showed a wonderful supply of warmth, love, and resilience. She hated any dwelling in sadness. Batya's children, Jessica, Abigail, Gideon, know and always knew how much she loved them. She could be fiery as well as warm. She wanted the best for her children, and when necessary she would let them know, although it would be Bernard who would give the restrained telling of. For in this too, they were an excellent team. When Batya and Bernard met, they soon became a single unit. They found love and optimism, and they built a life and a family. They spent around 60 years together, and Batya cared for Bernard when he was unwell with brilliant devotion and dedication. She dearly loved her grandchildren, Samantha, Emma, Jane, Charlie, Harry, and Jean. Bernard and Batya gathered people around them. They had groups of friends from their decade in Hong Kong, from various parts of the world, and from different parts of London. They were both so loved. Over the years, Batya had found it increasingly important to bring family together. Indeed, she was arranging a big family meal for the week after she passed away. As I sat with you, her family, sharing memories of Batya, you would sometimes share a story and then say to me, but probably don't share that one. These were stories for us from when we would all sit around the table together and laugh. Batya brought light, warmth and love that so many felt, while it was also still just for you. In Batya's memory, let us each bring more light, more warmth, and more love. Now, before the reception downstairs, we will do two final ancient prayers of passionate remembrance. Firstly, Yoav will sing El Maleh Rachamim, which you can find halfway down page 10. And then we're all invited to say the words of the Kaddish on page 11. Please do so.
I love listening to the tune. It's really nice, isn't it?
El Maleh Rachamim Shochen B'Meramim Hametzem Menucha Nechona על כנפי השכינה במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מה זהירים את נשמת בתיה שעליך לעולמה בעבור שנדבו צדקה באז אזכרת נשמתה בגן עדן בגן עדן תהא מנוחתה לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירך בסתר כנפיו לעולמים ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה אדוני ונחלתה ותנוח ותנוח בשלום על משכבה
Kaddish is on page 11. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, ve'alma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chai echol u'yom echol, u'chayei dochol beit Yisrael, b'gala u'bizman kariv v'yivru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach ve'alam u'lamei amaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה שמי תקודשה בריחו לעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה ואמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן יהי שלמה רבה משמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. Amen. And please be seated as we conclude with Yoav singing Amen. Amen.
Amen.
us downstairs. May her memory be a blessing.